And feel free to stick around. Colin and I are going to do a recap of the show, and then we're going to delve into, as we always do, something not related to politics. We're going to delve into the Taylor Swift-Travis Kelce romance.
I know all about it.
I know almost nothing about it. That's not going to stop me from talking about it, though. I'm Arizona Family political editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
All right, and welcome back to another edition of the Politics Unplugged podcast. This time, the edition is check out our new digs here. We've got this place remodeled, and it looks great. I've got a couple of wonderful guests here to stop by to talk about this week in Arizona politics. I got Dan Scarpinato, former chief of staff for Governor Doug Ducey, and Tony Cani, who's run all sorts of campaigns for all sorts of different people, man. So I want to thank you both here for joining us. And I think the first topic I want to get into is the big story that's playing out this week, deals with the big Senate race here in Arizona. Kari Lake, and the reporting coming out this week that we saw is that Kari Lake is essentially appears to be offering an olive branch to certain members of the Republican Party that she had kind of lashed out against during her unsuccessful attempt to run for governor last year. We're talking about, the more moderate wing of the Republican Party, the McCain supporters out there. She's reached out to those folks. Former opponents like Karen Taylor Robeson, who was Kari Lake's primary opponent, who lost last year. Lake has met with her. I've got that confirmed. It was a couple of weeks ago. My first question to you, Dan, is since you're the Republican here at the table, what's your take on this?
Well, I love our good friend Barrett Marson, who's a PR guy here in town. He's been a long time
friend of the pod.
Yes. But I love that he just tweets that this is happening, and then there's Washington Post stories and everything. It does feel kind of overblown. I mean, Kari Lake's a candidate for office. She's running for office. She's talking to people. I mean, I don't really see why that's a big news story.
Tony?
She did last time, too, right? After the primary, she sat down with a lot of other people. She reached out to people. I think the thing I'm thinking about with whether or not it's going to be whether it's successful, right? I think that there are some of the leaders in this, more mainstream wing of the Republican Party that might be willing to sort of work with her and support her, but whether or not that translates to the voters is going to have more to do with her rhetoric and the campaign she runs than these meetings that she has. And I'm sure that people are trying to convince her in these meetings, at least I guess, you might know, to hey, there's some things that voters want to hear and some things that voters don't want to hear. But the hard thing for her is going to be going forward. I think that she has, especially over the last year, done so many of these far right wing internet shows, podcasts, and speeches and events, and traveled all over that. That's her stump speech. That's her shtick. That's sort of what she does. And so I think that it's going to be a challenge for her to successfully pivot away, especially when things in the campaign start to get emotional. But, I mean, I think the one thing it does show is that she, or at least people that are close to her, realize that things have to be different if she's going to have a chance to win this time.
Yeah, and we've already seen kind of a change in attitude and strategy with her. It was a few months ago, she announced a ballot-chasing campaign for early ballots. After.
Yeah, she acted like she invented get out the vote efforts, which, Daniel and everybody who's been doing this for a long time are like, hey, this has been going on for 20 years. Congratulations. You figured it out.
And for most of those 20 years, Republicans always had a huge advantage.
A huge advantage. They kicked our butts.
Huge. So, Dan, can this work? I mean, this change of strategy, it was a very narrow victory for Katie Hobbs last year. Can she broaden the base by doing this kind of stuff?
Yes, I think that I've been very impressed with her campaign. I've always thought she's a real talent. And
there's no question. I think politically, she's unbelievably gifted as a communicator. I mean, she knows what she's doing back there.
And you've been on the receiving end of some of that, so
I can concur.
So I think that I think she's a very talented candidate. I think she's a very warm person when you interact with her. I think this is a very different race. A Senate race is very different than a governor's race in terms of how voters make up their mind, the issues at play. So I've been impressed. I've been impressed with her campaign. I think she's got a great team, and so I always go back to every race in Arizona is going to be close, and so somebody's going to win this thing by 20,000 votes, 10,000 votes, which is a rounding error. So she's got a real shot in this, and I think the more outreach, the better. I tend to think this is something like Tony said that she's been doing for a long time. I mean, I don't know what you consider me on this spectrum, but she
a hell of a guy.
You're
just a hell of a guy, Dan.
A mercenary.
But her and her team reached out to me after the primary, and I had no involvement in the primary, but they reached out, and I found that her and her team are very open, and I think that again, this race will be different because I think Ruben Gallego in many ways will unite Republicans around Kari Lake.
Oh, that's an interesting wrinkle coming from the Republican at the table. Tony, do you agree with that? Do you think Gallego's the kind of personality? Because, I mean, the same could be said about Kari Lake, as is said by other folks like Donald Trump. Donald Trump can rally the opposition around whoever is running against that person. Do you think Gallego is that kind of polarizing personality that could rally Republicans around Kari Lake?
I think Trump is, as the nominee, is the fact that there's going to be a presidential race might have more to do necessarily, I think, than maybe Ruben. I mean, if you look at the way Republicans ran against Katie Hobbs, they're running as though she used to represent a liberal district, right? Like a lot of the same kind of stuff, and it still wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to sort of get people. I mean, you look at the polling now, she's losing a significant number of Republicans to Sinema. I think that's one of the big questions, whether or not Sinema actually runs. I'm still in the minority. I still think Sinema's running. A lot of people don't.
I think she is too. So
yeah, all right. So we're here together.
So I'm in the minority on this. I don't think she is.
Yeah, I think she's running. And so I think that, the fact that it's going to be a national campaign is going to make the partisanship even more intense. And so I don't think it's necessarily Ruben that's going to do it. But the question is she going to be able to pull in the independents and moderate Republicans who are frustrated with the election denial and with all this other kind of stuff? And there's a long time to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the state of the economy. There's a lot, like what's going on in the world. These are going to have big factors too. And so, I don't know. I think that if I was on her campaign, I'd be saying, hey, we're starting behind. We got to catch up. That's the mentality that I would have.
And what's the kind of issue you think with Ruben that could unite them, unite Republicans in opposition to Ruben? Because I'm looking at Ruben. It's like I'm looking at how voting is today, and voting is very kind of an emotional thing on these big races like that. Ruben's got a really interesting story to tell.
Yep,
he's got a really good personality. What's the policy that's going to get Republicans all worked up to go rally around Lake?
Well, so a couple things. One is the big difference. I mean, one of the differences is Kari Lake doesn't have a primary this time. Sure. I mean, I guess she does, but she really doesn't. She's going to be the nominee unless, there's an asteroid hits Arizona or something. I mean, she's going to be the Republican nominee, and she has so much stock in the bank with conservatives that I think she's got a lot of runway, and you're already seeing it. I think her messaging has been really good in everything we're talking about. So I think that she's got 10 months. There's 10 months till the primary where she can be out there building that foundation. I think the issue with Ruben, like when you look at Kyrsten Sinema, whatever it was, 1.0, 2.0, maybe we're now on 3.0, but Kyrsten Sinema in 2018, ran kind of this very milquetoast, we're going to work with everybody, bring everybody together. Katie Hobbs kind of did the same thing. And I think that mostly worked because, they weren't really out there much. They weren't talking about a whole lot. I think, Ruben's a different personality. I think he is going to be more out front. You're already seeing it. He did a lot of interviews right out the gate when he announced. I thought he was pretty aggressive against Kyrsten Sinema, which, I guess that's part of the strategy, and I totally get it. So I just think that, the dynamic of him getting in the race because he thinks Kyrsten Sinema did the wrong thing working with Republicans makes it now hard to pivot and say, oh, I'm going to be like Kyrsten Sinema and Katie Hobbs. And I don't know that Katie Hobbs is doing that, but that's how she presented herself. So I think that it's going to be challenging for him to run the kind of campaign that's worked for Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema and Katie Hobbs and Kathy Hoffman and Andre Fontes, all the people who Democrats have won statewide with that kind of brand. I'm not sure that's going to translate in this race. But having said that, I mean, it's going to be a barn burner. I don't count him out by any means.
And why does Kyrsten Sinema, why is she continuing to trail so badly in some of the polling we're seeing? Again, to Dan's point, still 10 months out from the election. When things really start heating up, a lot can change. But, if you look at it from Kirsten's point of view, from Senator Sinema's point of view, she is a very influential senator. And she has been the lead or has helped pass key pieces of legislation down there. This idea that she is a workhorse and not a show horse, she's got facts to back that up.
Well, she's got facts to back up that she's pushed legislation, but I think part of the show horse thing means that I want attention, right? That's really what people say, like when you're a show horse on a workhorse. And I think, my read of what happened to the senator is, it's different a little bit than what Dan just said. It's that voters have just decided that they don't like the way that she operates. They don't trust her as much as they used to. I think that they found her to be disingenuous now, that some of the stories she told about her background, and then now she, about, growing up poor, but now she's running around with heads of banks and doing all these things that, these expensive wineries and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that what has happened is she saw a brand collapse. And, where people were like, wait a minute, I thought she was the one who gets things done, but now all of a sudden she's the one who's holding things up. And things that were broadly popular with the American and Arizona public, she was holding them up, even if it came down to like a partisan thing in the middle. And I think, so that's one thing. I think the other thing is like she's hurting a little bit with she's hurting with sort of conservative base Republicans more than she was 2 years ago, because what she's bragging about are all of Biden's legislative accomplishments. And so the same things that Biden is going to say, I passed, Sinema is going to say, I wrote. And so that's going to become a problem for her in a presidential campaign when the presidential nominee on the Republican side is saying these things that you passed were terrible. And so I think she's just in a weird box because, some of the research I've been, told about is that her legislative accomplishments aren't going to be able to get her out of this hole with the voters that are possible to move. And so she's just stuck. And I think that's what it is. It's going to tighten. I think it's going to tighten up, and she's going to see some movement. And I think, some of the most recent polls show that there's been a little bit of movement for her. And I think that's why she's going to keep running. She's going to think she's got a chance.
Yeah, and some of the actual polling suggests that Kyrsten Sinema may be drawing more people away from Lake than Gallego. Why would that be the case? I mean, who are those people, those Republicans or those potential Lake supporters? Who are those folks that are then now going to Sinema?
Well, I don't know. I'm suspect of all this polling. I hate to be that guy. But, yeah, I don't think any of this is well-defined. And I think that the thing with her is that she actually has a good story to tell, but I think she's a little bit of an enigma to Arizonans.
Which is strange because in a prior life, you were a reporter at the Capitol. I worked alongside with you. She was a very open lawmaker.
Right.
And it's like now I'm not disagreeing with you. I think she is an enigma to a lot of
and I think she's so. I mean, I personally think she's really good at this, and I mean, gosh, I hate to sound like her spokesperson, but because I never thought I would be, but I think she's actually done a really good job on many fronts and has some really good things to talk about. So she hasn't really been out there doing that a whole lot, and I'm sure there's reasons for that. But, you know, there was this really interesting analysis in the New York Times last Sunday that I largely agree with when we're talking about these independent candidacies and no labels and so forth. They said, you know, the real path for someone, you know, when elites talk about a third party, they usually talk about it kind of in the context of a Kirsten Sinema, socially liberal and fiscally conservative. But the real path for someone is more in the lane of being kind of culturally conservative, not necessarily on abortion and these other issues, but around, you know, the anti-wokeism, and then kind of economically more liberal, and that's kind of more the Manchin style, which is which I think actually probably has more appeal among this lane of people who are dissatisfied with both parties, kind of like the Elon Musk, Bill Maher party. And that's where I actually think there is a lane, but that's not really the lane that she's operating in. It's in more of kind of like the business lane.
And you know what?
I don't know what you think about that.
I just can't get over thinking about how horrible it'd be to hang out with Elon Musk and Bill Maher. Like,
well,
what a terrible hang. So, if anyone who's watching on video, if you saw me sort of zone out for a second, I was imagining, wow, that would be terrible.
Fun, but you know, whatever.
But I do
we've
think
established who Tony doesn't want to hang with.
I do think that is an interesting. That's a very interesting thing, because I think what that says to me in a lot of ways is, in a lot of the discourse about what moderate means, I think pundits and experts, moderate means not having a stance. And that's not what that analysis says. And, you know, I've said about McCain before. McCain wasn't a guy who didn't have positions, right? Like, you know, like people liked him because they believed him. They believed in what he was saying. And I do think, I mean, that makes sense.
No, like this is so true. Jim Colby, who was a mentor of mine, who many people would say was a moderate former congressman, he always said, if you're going to be a moderate, you can't allow yourself to get bulldozed and run over. You have to be really aggressive and really strong. And so I totally agree. I think if you're going to be in that camp, you've got to be really aggressive at being out there, getting your message out, and being very clear of where you stand on everything.
And Arizona voters tend to be, compared to other states, more transactional than other voters, meaning like, in transactional in the sense that they're like, I want you to get something done. I don't really care how you do it, but I want you to get something done. And so part of this entire campaign is going to be,
but that's Kirsten Sinema.
I was just going to say, like,
but
Kirsten Sinema is
who are, and that's how she ran before. But the problem is her brand collapsed, where all of a sudden she became somebody who was holding things up, and so now she's going to have to try and overcome that. But that bell's been rung. It's going to be a fascinating, very expensive campaign.
Oh man!
And the other thing is, it's just going to get super nasty against each other, and so I don't know, in a nasty campaign, how that's going to elevate her.
I think, too, it's going to be a very fascinating campaign to watch. Before we move on to the next subject, I do think, you guys kind of alluded to this, I think it's going to be contextualized. I think a lot of other things could influence this race, like what happens on the presidential ticket, the abortion measure on the ballot. These are the kinds of things that I think could have a huge monster effect on who comes out of that general election. And, you know, if it's a two-way or a three-way race, we'll have to wait and see. But I do want to kind of pivot now. I want to go take it down to the state level and talk a little bit about the GOP's funding plan that they rolled out this year. And I'm really stoked to have Daniel here because, you know, you were you know, kind of on the ground floor. You were on the ground floor when Governor Doug Ducey campaigned for and eventually passed narrowly Proposition 123, and that was a plan to take more money out of the state trust land and move that to schools. Now it's set to expire, and the GOP plan now is to essentially extend Prop 123. They're going to tweak it and say that money coming out of the state trust land is going to be used simply and solely for teacher pay raises. They want to give every teacher a $4,000 a year raise, boosting the state average of teacher salaries from $56,000 a year to $60,000 a year. I want to get your take on that, Daniel. Is this both good politics and good policy, or what?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's good policy and good politics. This is kind of a no-brainer. Now, I will say this was really hard to get done. It was very hard to get passed. I believe we rolled out this proposal in June of 2015. At the time, the state had no money. If you recall, we had just had to cut $1 billion out of the budget.
Good times. It was good times.
It was good times. And, this was Governor Ducey's idea. I was in the room when kind of the spark hit and this idea came together. And it did face a lot of opposition on the right and on the left. And it took us until, I think it was November of 2015, so almost 6 months, to actually get it referred by the legislature. And then the campaign was, at times, felt almost insurmountable. And it passed narrowly. And I remember we had a meeting. And, one of the things that had happened is that the education establishment was very supportive. All of the education groups helped get it done, endorsed it, and all of those groups largely have different leadership now. The rank and file, in many cases, were working against it, telling people vote no against this because we could get a better deal. And in the meeting we had, probably a week after the campaign, Andrew Morrill, who at the time ran the AEA, great guy, he said, Prop 301, which had been 20 years almost earlier, which was also about teacher pay that Jane Hull did, he's like, everybody loves Prop 301 now. It passed by 51%. It barely passed. He said in 10 years, everyone's going to say they were for Prop 123. And I think that is kind of what's happened. The fund has built and built and built. Schools have gotten money, and it's been, really good all around. I think this is a good plan that keeps it going. And I think this campaign will be easier in the sense that this isn't something new now. All the things that were said didn't come to fruition. And now, if it doesn't get renewed, it is a cliff. The money goes away and goes nowhere other than just continues to get invested in the stock market and build and build and build. So I think there's some really good cases to be made here.
Yeah, it gets a little wonky about how all of this works. And like one of the big opponents for the original Prop 123 is now the chairman of the Republican Party, Jeff DeWitt, who was treasurer at the time. And what he was worried about was that it eats into the principle of the fund.
Didn't happen.
And so there's this, but there's some discussion about whether this plan should only go for teacher pay raises. I mean, there's a lot that plagues the education. Ask you, Tony. I mean, should this be more expansive than just teacher pay raises? Because if you talk to some of the education leaders in this state, money alone is not going to address like the teaching shortage and retention. That a lot of teachers are leaving for a lot of different reasons and not just pay. But you still have schools that have other needs, capital needs, financial needs, and stuff like that. Should this have been more broader?
Yes, probably. I mean, the thing I want to get back quickly to sort of like the history of this, which of course I was on the sideline watching, but from the outside, Governor Ducey and his team, they reached out to the education community. They worked really hard to build a consensus with these different leaders in these different organizations, and they campaigned together. I mean, I watched the debate where it was the head of the teachers union was debating, one of the two people who were publicly against this, and that was a campaign where I don't think they had much money that they spent.
Yeah, we spent about $6 million, which
or the opposition
campaign
was
a lot.
The opposition campaign.
Oh, I thought you meant the pro side.
Yeah, the pro side spent big. The
Yeah.
opposition side didn't spend much.
$70,000-$80,000 or something.
And I think, the lesson I got out of that a little bit is that there's just and I think there's a bunch of different lessons, but there's distrust in a lot of ways when it comes to the Arizona voting public about these different promises that politicians are making to pay for teachers. I mean, there's been a big history of people who are talented like Daniel putting numbers together to say, actually, look, we have spent more money than anyone has ever spent in the history of the world. But then teachers are like, wait a minute, it's not really, and educators and schools saying we're still wildly underfunded. And so the big question is going to be, are voters going to trust that this is actually going to solve the problem? And the thing I don't know about that I need to learn about, and I'm saying this is maybe you both do, is is what this does, sort of like the settlement that caused 1, 2, 3 to even happen, which was the
Right.
lawsuit that the state wasn't appropriately funding public education. And that was sort of the thing where the teachers unions and all these people were like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're going to get a better deal, but this is actually a deal. We need to get something done. And I don't know how that's going to play out. I think, I do think that there is going to be some distrust of whether or not this is actually going to solve the problem that it purports to solve, in a lot of ways, because many of the people who will be out there front and center promoting this are people that for a long time have argued that they're already paying enough, that this doesn't need to happen. And so I'm just curious to see sort of how this plans out.
Yeah, it seems like too, and we'll end it here, but also like if the plan is to have the legislature refer this to the ballot next year, that kind of makes it real hard for the Republican-controlled legislature when they start looking for cuts next year to go in and cut K-12 funding. Because you can't put this on the ballot and then go and cut K-12 funding because the state finances are kind of a mess right now.
Well, not I mean, listen, the projections are we now have a budget twice the size and a deficit projected to be half the size of last time. So in terms of the actual percentage of the budget, it's not that large. And
it's getting bigger all the time.
We don't know. The one constant is all these economic projections have proven to be wrong the entire time that I've been involved in budgeting. So let's wait and see what happens. But here's what I would say is that let's just be honest, okay? There's politics as part of this. And one thing that has changed is I think that we've gotten more divided in the past decade. And, my God, at some point, can the Democrats support more money for education? I mean, at some point, it kind of becomes laughable. And I think we've reached kind of the jump the shark moment of like, you can't be against every single thing that ever comes up to do more funding for education. And the reality is they want this as a political issue. And you could say that about a lot of things on the right that Republicans do. And you could say that there's a lot of groups on the right that Republicans are beholden to. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about education. And on this issue, I think the Democrats are beholden to the teachers union, which largely doesn't represent teachers. It represents non-teachers. And they want to keep this as a political issue. They don't want to solve it.
Well, Republicans, though, too, they'd love to get this governor on record as opposing another teacher pay increase.
But why? Then she should come out and support.
Well, and some context here, maybe you should have put this in the beginning. There's still a lot of details in this plan.
There's always details, but why is it so hard to come out and say, I agree, let's raise teacher pay?
Mm-hmm. Because and also, boy, Democrats should really do everything that Republicans put together without any Democratic input, right? Like that's basically, it's like, hey, we have a 1-seat majority. You should do exactly what we say. We aren't going to include you in the planning. Mm-hmm. Oh boy, they don't want anything. But the dominant story about education in Arizona right now, for a long time it's been teacher pay, are the abuses of the voucher program, of the ESA program. Mm-hmm. And how that story plays out and how the Republican leaders are going to refuse to put any sort of accountability in this next legislative session is also going to be coloring the broader part of this conversation.
So let's keep focusing on that and talking about that and just never solve the teacher pay problem. That's what I'm hearing. It's like, let's just keep this going
teacher
so
pay,
that we can every cycle run Arizona, on it, rather than saying, let's fix it. Let's actually increase teacher pay.
I have an idea.
Then we wouldn't be able to talk about it every election and say that it's a crisis.
There was a ballot initiative. There was a ballot initiative that voters of Arizona approved that the Republican establishment got thrown out by the courts, right? So it's not like Democrats haven't come up with a proposal. They came with a proposal.
Well, that voters money didn't approved directed towards teacher pay.
It would have increased teacher pay.
How do you know?
Because it would have increased teacher pay.
You would have been relying on every school district in the state and every administration, which in the past has proven that they haven't done that.
People have faith in their individual school boards, despite the fact of a well-funded national effort to demonize school board members.
I would just look at the facts, and when the 20% pay raise was given, they did not use it all for teacher pay, and in fact, they increased administrator pay. And as a result, in some districts did, I mean, it was still in many cases like 17%, which isn't bad. But what is the big deal? Why can't, like, I don't get this aversion to increasing teacher pay when we have the money to do it. It just doesn't make sense. And I can only think it's political.
Well, I mean, we'll have to end it on that too. But part of this,
the
too,
teacher caucus came out against this stuff. The teachers in the legislature, or former teachers, came out and said, "No, we don't want to raise teacher pay." I mean, it's laughable.
They don't want this particular proposal.
They want more. They want flexibility with the funding. They
want a permanent revenue source. This is called the Permanent Endowment Trust Fund. It's permanent.
All right. Well, we're going to have to end it there. We're supposed to be about 20 minutes for this segment. We've blown way past that. Colin's freaking out back there. You should see him. You can see him on TV. He's really upset with me at this point. So we're going to have to end it there. So thanks a lot, guys, for stopping by here. And
thank you.
And we'll be back here in a minute. All right, welcome back to the second half of the show. And as per usual, I'm joined by producer extraordinaire, Colin. How are you today?
I'm good. You?
I am wore out, man. I'm tired. It's been a long week.
It's been a week.
I was sick last week. Spent most of this week, kind of getting better, but it's still the kind of lingering. I know people don't want to hear all the ins and outs of that, but that said, kind of wore out. Just getting ready for the holiday season. This is the last pod before that airs. Before we chow down on some turkey and other things, tofuki, whatever your deal is. Looking forward to it. And what do you think of the discussion? I was a little surprised. It got a little heated talking about the education funding plan the Republicans put out there, and surprise, surprise. I mean, is politics at the legislature?
Yeah. I got a little animated. It was fun. Now, to me, and you're much more of a political insider than I am.
Yeah.
Is part of the resistance the fact that the funding ideas that come from the right tend to be these weird little bits here and there that Democrats then assume are more grandstanding than helpful?
I think right now, the way everything's set up, it's giving Democrats an excuse to hit the pause button in large part because there are still a lot of details on that education funding plan, and that is what they're going to want to see. Democrats are worried that Republicans are going to stick things on this plan, little amendments to the proposal that they may not like. There's worries, there's concerns that after they refer this, that the legislature could turn around and then start chopping and making cuts to education as they look to balance the checkbook again. There is the state
and
right now.
There's a strong history of that.
Yeah, and right now the state finances. I know there's always skeptic. These are projections, but the projections appear to be getting worse by the day or week or whatever. Because you're looking at a projected $400 million deficit, and at the end of this current fiscal year, and another $450 million projected deficit for the following fiscal year, which combined, I don't know, I'm not good at math, tells me that's $850 million in deficits. And that's when you got to start doing your belt tightening. And it seems like, and Dan did a good job explaining this, and like Republicans are saying, that this is just a fraction of an $18 billion budget. And true that is, but it's the talking point now we're hearing from Republicans. Heard that from Senate President Warren Peterson when I interviewed him about this plan. Earlier in the week, he told me that it's just going to be a little belt tightening, that they can get more efficiencies out of government by cutting certain things. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But I think at the end of the day, it's lack of details in this plan that gives Democrats some legitimate reason to at least pause.
Is it me, or does that number, the total number for the deficit, seem to line up very nicely with the estimate of how much school vouchers are costing?
That's a dangerous question, my friend. It's a dangerous question, my friend.
Just throwing that out there.
Well, what we'll see is going to be interesting to see what happens with that, because what's expanding the cost right now with the voucher program, my understanding, and I'm sure I'll get emails telling me maybe I'm missing the point here, is the number of students who have never been in or weren't previously in public schools and have been in private schools with their parents paying the whole freight for them to go to the private school of their choosing, who are now then applying and receiving state fund money to help offset what they were paying before.
Right.
It's the way the program is set up. All school age kids are now eligible for this, and you'd be a fool, as if you're a parent, not to apply for this money.
Right.
And you are seeing abuses in the system, with people taking this money and paying it for things that don't appear to have anything to do with educating their children. But when you get in programs this big, there's always going to be some of that.
Yeah.
So we'll wait and see if that kind of like levels off at this point, because it's still a new program. And of course, as soon as parents find out they're eligible for money they weren't prior eligible for, you're going to apply for that. And that,
Absolutely,
there you go. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, and me complaining about how wore out I am here at the end of the week, man, I definitely wanted to engage you in a non-political topic to end the final show before we hit the holiday season, because I thought, Colin, that what Arizona needs, you and I to weigh in on the biggest issue faced in America today, and that is Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce romance.
Yeah, because there's no danger there.
We've made no secrets that we are huge football fans, both the college game and the pro game.
Yeah,
and it seems like you can't turn on watch football on Sunday without seeing something with T Swift and Travis Kelce.
Well, I give I tip of the cap to Travis Kelce and his representation, because that man is on every single commercial that airs during any sporting event at all. I mean, that's remarkable. The tight end of the Kansas City Chiefs is now the face of the league, selling everything in the world.
It is absolutely amazing, and I got to tell you, I am so impressed and so amazed that football is like the biggest entertainment thing in America, right? It owns an entire day on the schedule every week in the fall and winter, and somehow Taylor Swift has increased exposure to the NFL with people who don't watch the game.
Yeah,
apparently are now tuning in to catch a glimpse of the Swift thing. I don't get it, but it's a thing.
And the Swifties are going to know the game better than most of the standard football audience within like a month. You'll have these teenage girls sitting there going, "Why are they going into the cover two?"
They'll TikTok it.
Yes.
I cannot wait.
Yes.
I cannot wait until the Swifties catch up on this. Like I said, I don't understand it. I mean, she is just so enormously popular and whatnot.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But you kind of made a good point. We were chatting, having some fun about what do we talk about at the end of this, because we like to talk about something and take the focus away from politics.
Yeah.
And like, what do we talk about? And we were laughing about this and why not? And you made this point that you think she handles her celebrity amazingly well.
Yeah, it's remarkable. She is someone who is, so many eyes on her. She's someone who can sell out. She can go into a town and play a football stadium and can do as many shows as she wants, and they're all going to sell out within seconds. There is a demographic, and I don't mean to narrow her following down to one demographic, because it's widespread. There are, old men who like Taylor Swift. But that hardcore group of 18 to mid-30s women adore Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking to someone who's in that age group who said a lot of it is they feel like they've grown up with her at this point and matured with her. And she's been in such a focus all that time and never seems to take any misstep at all. It's remarkable to have that spotlight on you. And everything that comes up, and it's not all positive. She had the lawsuit where the radio guy groped her.
Yeah.
And even through that, it seemed like every step of the way, any question she gets asked, she has a perfect answer. Her interaction with her fans seems remarkably good. And that life is not an easy.
It wasn't easy to be that level of celebrity, say 20 years ago. But today, where everybody has a cell phone out with video, it is kind of incredible.
Yeah.
It is very incredible the way she handles all this, and kudos for her for that. But maybe end it here on the question. Do you think this is true romance or true PR?
I mean, I'm a cynical guy. I'm not that cynical. They seem like cute together. The one thing that did strike me was you've got the very pretty, bookish, loves music girl who's sort of a poet type, who apparently has fallen for the big dopey jock.
Yeah, probably laughs at fart jokes and stuff like that, right?
And I just thought, man, if I was back in high school, this would piss me off so much. That just would seem so unfair.
Oh man, that is.
And
great.
have you seen his tweets? People have been digging up his old tweets.
Oh yeah, there was. God, what was the one comparing what was said 10, 12 years ago on Twitter or something like that?
Yeah.
What was that again?
Well, someone was comparing her song lyrics to his thing from the same era when he was talking about how he gave a piece of bread to a squirrel and it just smashed it, man, crazy. Didn't know squirrels love bread, and everywhere it's misspelled. Squirrel is SQUIRLE, and piece is misspelled. And what's funny is there have been a lot of major athletes where people have gone back and looked at their tweets from when they were 18, 19, 20, and a lot of them end up issuing apologies.
Oh yeah,
because they're 19-year-old jocks. They're going to tweet dumb stuff.
19-year-olds in general are going to
19-year-olds in general, they're going to have, their social media history is going to be pretty cringy, if not offensive.
Oh,
at times.
yeah.
And his stuff is just, the vast majority is just dopey stuff I watched a squirrel smash a piece of bread. Had a teacher who didn't think I was paying attention, so she called on me, but I was paying attention, and I nailed it.
Oh, my Lord.
And it's just...
It's good stuff.
Most of it's just weirdly charming, which is great.
I don't know much about it. Hasn't stopped us from talking about it, but I'm all in. I dig it. I like the attention. What the hell? I think it's, I think it's real. I think it's also PR. I think it could be both.
There's a little PR mixed in. I'm sure.
There's that scene of her when she gets off stage in Argentina and sees him. He flew down there.
Yeah.
There was some radio. Fox Sports radio guy, we don't have to name who he is, he's popular enough, went off and said it had this take on it because he felt like he needed to weigh in, just like we felt like we needed to weigh in on this.
Without actually having any opinions.
Without having really an opinion. Look, I just gave one. I'm all for it, man. I'm all in. I'm all in. Do it.
They seem happy.
They seem happy. They seem cute together. But then this one Fox Sports guy was I don't know, this has reached critical mass. Travis Kelce is going to get distracted and Chiefs are going to lose games. I'm come on, man. Come on, man.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
No.
As they would say in the sports world, that's a dumb take, man.
Yeah, it's a genuinely dumb take. I think they can live with the distraction of their tight end might be dating a pop singer.
Yeah, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Good for them. So move forward, go on. Go on and conquer the world, those two. Best of luck to them.
I think they may have already conquered the world.
Yeah, there you go, man. Conquer it again, I suppose. So before we go, your Oregon Ducks have a big game this weekend against who?
Against Arizona State University. I will be there.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I believe the Ducks are 22.5-point favorites, so we'll see.
Is that it?
That's it, yeah.
You think they'll cover?
Man, ASU looks really good one week, and then they lose, I think, 55-3 to Utah another week, and the Ducks handled Utah pretty easily.
Hey, look, man.
Who knows?
Hey, man, big weekend for my Iowa Hawkeyes. They can win. They can clinch the Big Ten West with a victory over Illinois.
And if anyone has followed Iowa football for this year,
Please send me an email. I want to be friends with you. If anybody's listening to this and is a big Iowa Hawkeye fan, please contact me. Send me an email. I want to be friends with you.
they keep setting new records for the lowest over-under on the betting line.
Yeah.
Each game, like there have been something like 6 games in the history of betting lines on college football where the over-under was at like 32 points or less.
Oh, yeah.
And Iowa was involved in 5 of them, I think. And the number's probably 6 out of 7 now.
Yeah.
Iowa's been involved in 6 out of 7, I believe, and I believe they've gone under on all of them.
Hey, man, this week against Illinois, over under 30.5.
And it's like, you know, kick a field goal and the game's probably out of reach. Is it strange rooting for a team that's doing well in terms of their record? Like you said, they're going to clinch the Big Ten West, but is also completely unwatchable?
Oh, it's frustrating, and you've heard me complain about it. But I've at this point, I'm just embracing it. You know, I'm just like, hit the under, boys. You know, it's frustrating because, you can lose. They can just as easily lose any of these games as win them because they're all close.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah. So big weekend for that, man. Looking forward to that. I'm taking the under with Iowa, Illinois.
Always smart.
Suggest any of you out there are looking for a good bet on that, take the under.
It always hits.
All right, that's all the time we got this week. Thanks for thanks for the download and whatnot, and we'll see you next time.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.